On the other hand, Netanyahu is more likely to leave frustrated, I think, than Zelensky, because he does want the war to continue as far as we know. He's been dropping into conversation that regime change is still a good idea because you just can't get a deal that will stick with the Iranians. And that's certainly what he'll be pushing on Donald Trump, who we strongly suspect would much rather have a deal and put this war behind him. So you can see the American and the Israeli aims have completely diverged since the original attack in February, with the Israelis wanting to press on and the Americans wanting to pull back.
Now, let's talk about what's going on in Washington at the White House, because, well, both the Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu and the Ukraine leader Volodymyr Zelensky are in Washington. They're there for the funeral of the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. They have both in the diary meetings, though, with President Trump. So let's talk to David Charter, the assistant editor, US, of The Times. David, welcome to you.
Good morning, John, from Washington.
Thanks for joining me, David. So, look, the president's been meeting Zelensky. I do want to come to that, and that could potentially significant for the Ukraine war. But now we have Netanyahu. He's in the diary now. And we can presume, surely, that he's in there with the idea of encouraging Donald Trump to reignite and continue the war against Iran.
I think so. It's Benjamin Netanyahu has just arrived. He's gone in like Zelensky, actually. He went in by a side door, no great fanfare, no big Oval Office press meeting, no berating of either leader from the couch by J.D. Vance or anybody else. It's all pretty low key, and that's because Trump's kind of been bounced into these meetings by the Lindsey Graham funeral and these two leaders attending, because they represent the countries that Lindsey Graham was most influential and most interested in promoting in Washington. So they're slightly accidental meetings in that sense. But Netanyahu's been pressing for weeks, actually, to get back in front of Trump. It's his 8th face-to-face meeting of the second term, I think, and this is more than anybody else. But it's kind of fascinating that we've got two leaders who are on different trajectories, apparently, with Trump in recent weeks, in that yes. Netanyahu's a bit on the outs, and Zelensky has gone up in Trump's estimation. You know, Trump likes a winner. He doesn't like losers, and that was how he regarded Zelensky last year. He was told by Putin that Putin was winning, and he believed him. But the reality of the war in Ukraine has been that Ukraine has innovated and fought back in such a way that has caught Trump's eye and has found impressive. And now we've got Zelensky not only offering drone technology to help the Americans in the Gulf, but actually we think bringing with him today evidence that the Russians have been helping the Iranians. So what he's trying to do, of course, is to prove to Trump that Ukraine is your friend. It's not, you don't need to be suspicious of us as you have been. You can support the Ukrainian cause because we support you.
Well, indeed. I mean, and on Ukraine, as you say, Donald Trump is thought to be seen to be more sympathetic now to the cause of Ukraine. But you can never take these things much for granted, can you? I mean, the last time we heard from Donald Trump, after talking to Zelensky, he said you can have a license to build Patriot missiles, those high-tech, those highly advanced air defense missiles. Has anything been said or done since President Trump made that pledge?
No, this is Zelensky's, probably his top aim from the visit, is to clinch that deal, is to get the intellectual property, the blueprints, basically, for building their own missile defense using American know-how and technology, but building it themselves. That's what he seemed to be promised, as you say, but it hasn't happened. And he needs, and the one thing they've always been most desperate for is to defend their cities from Russian missiles. So he will hope to clinch that today. On the other hand, Netanyahu is more likely to leave frustrated, I think, than Zelensky, because he does want the war to continue as far as we know. He's been dropping into conversation that regime change is still a good idea because you just can't get a deal that will stick with the Iranians. And that's certainly what he'll be pushing on Donald Trump, who we strongly suspect would much rather have a deal and put this war behind him. So you can see the American and the Israeli aims have completely diverged since the original attack in February, with the Israelis wanting to press on and the Americans wanting to pull back.
All right, good to talk to you. Thank you so much, David. David Charter there in Washington for the Times. How would you describe Netanyahu's mission in this meeting with the president?
Well, Netanyahu, in the space of just a couple of months, has gone from being the the partner of Donald Trump in war. They, at the end of February, they embarked together on this massive campaign against Iran. So he was Trump's closest partner. They were fighting a war together, wingtip to wingtip, as they said. And then a couple of months later, Trump suddenly announced a ceasefire. And that left Netanyahu on the sidelines, not part of any of the discussions and the negotiations ongoing between the US and Iran. And Netanyahu is now on a mission to try and restore that partnership that he had with Trump not so long ago.
Yes. I mean, Donald Trump's attitude to Bibi Netanyahu has visibly cooled in these recent weeks. How would you characterize Netanyahu's attitude to Trump, if it's possible to make that distinction?
Well, Netanyahu can't go out against Trump. Netanyahu is not he's not the senior partner in this relationship. He's very much dependent on Donald Trump, both in a strategic sense, in the fact that America is Israel's strategic ally and supplier of much of the weapon systems, and ultimately they're the superpower. Israel isn't. And on a personal and political level, Netanyahu has invested so much of his political capital at home into his relationship with Trump. He's been telling for years Israelis that there is no world leader as close to Trump as I am. I have a special relationship with him. Nobody else can have this kind of relationship, and therefore you have to continue voting for me as prime minister. And as you know, 3 months from now there's an election in Israel. So for Netanyahu, this visit to the White House is not just about restoring Israel's strategic position and partnership with Israel. It's very much about restoring his own image.
Yes.
As this leader who's close to Trump.
Yes. I mean, some of those around President Trump have been very blunt about describing Israel as now being without friends and without supporters. On the Israeli side, Anshad, is there a corresponding feeling of isolation?
Yeah, certainly. And I think that one of the reasons that we're seeing Netanyahu's party, Likud, not doing well in the polls 3 months before the election, the fact that we're seeing in the surveys which are asking Israelis who's the best candidate for prime minister, we're seeing Netanyahu's challengers, Gadi Eisenkot and even Naftali Bennett, beginning to overtake Netanyahu in those surveys. I think is very much to do with the fact that Israelis are now seeing this visible cooling of relations between Netanyahu and Trump, and the way in which Israel has been almost put in the corner when it comes to its strategic standing in the region.
Yes, I mean, when you look at some of the things that MAGA America's first lobby are posting and saying, they clearly fear that their man Donald Trump is maybe more susceptible to Netanyahu's calls for an escalation against Iran. I mean, the president is pretty widely described as having suffered a strategic defeat against Iran. Hormuz Strait is closed. The Houthis are have opened another front on the Red Sea, and we've seen the volatility of oil prices. Is there a feeling, do you think, that the president is susceptible to, I don't know, persuasion? I won't say pressure, because it's hard perhaps for Israel to pressure President Trump, but open to those arguments, more so than some might imagine?
Well, we've seen how Donald Trump has changed his attitude, not just to Netanyahu, but to other world leaders. Just before Netanyahu entered the meeting with Trump, there was someone else there. There was Zelensky, who we all remember that first meeting in which basically Donald Trump kicked him out of the White House, and they were at open loggerheads. And now the relationship, by all accounts, is much warmer, and it's partly due to the fact that some of the people in Trump's circle have been to Kiev and have changed their views of Zelensky. Zelensky. There's the fact that currently he's seen to be winning, or at least at an advantage against Russia. So Donald Trump, I think, sees Zelensky in a different light now. And the reverse seems to have happened between Trump and Netanyahu, but it doesn't mean it can't change back again. We've seen Trump change, chop and change so many times when it comes to his foreign policy.
So what now then are Israel's ambitions for dealing with Hezbollah and the Israeli presence in Lebanon?
Well, you said Israel, and the question is, you're talking about Israel's ambitions or Netanyahu's ambitions?
I should say Netanyahu's ambition.
Netanyahu's ambition right now is to win an election in 3 months, and his base is still very much interested in continuing this war with Iran and continuing fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. Netanyahu's hands right now are tied by Donald Trump on all those 3 fronts, and I doubt that he'll get much leeway or freedom of maneuver from those 3 very uneasy ceasefires from Donald Trump in this meeting, which has just ended 10 minutes ago. So far, we've only seen a rather bland statement that the meeting was positive. So we'll know more, I assume, in the next few hours as both sides start briefing the media. But from what we've seen in the last few weeks, I don't think Netanyahu's going to get very much. The fact that he basically needed the funeral service for Lindsey Graham, which is later on today in Washington, as an excuse to come to Washington and meet Trump. We know that he's been trying for weeks and weeks to get a meeting and hasn't been very successful. I think that reflects on what we can expect to hear from the meeting. Also, the fact that this was a meeting without media. We've seen so many high-level meetings between Donald Trump and world leaders over the last year and a half, where an entire cohort of reporters are allowed in to ask questions while the leaders are sitting down. And this meeting was held basically behind closed doors. I think all those things indicate that Netanyahu doesn't have that much that he can get out of it. But like I say, we've seen from Donald Trump so many surprising turns that I think we have to wait and see and hear what we're going to hear from both sides. But as far as we know now, it hasn't been very encouraging for Netanyahu.
All right, sounds like good advice. Really helpful to talk to you, Anshul. Thank you. Anshul Favour,
John,
the Israel correspondent for The Economist there.